So, that it's an indicator of the adoption is on the rise and people are still investing. And we see a uneven scaling. So nearly 90% of the companies use AI, but two-thirds are still stuck in the pilot experimentation phase. And only 5 to 6% of the companies are true high performance, achieving enterprise-wide scale and value. So what we need to take a learning from is to have a closer look at what's been happening. Is it the right level of leadership? Is did they follow a playbook which is very different from the companies or the people that are not achieving similar results? So that could be a big indicator of what's in for 2026. Rise of AI agent is on the rise. It's super hot with 62% of the companies experimenting with it, particularly IT and knowledge management is seems to be the major case, and I guess nearly and every other case is sort of like under 10% utilization. So while these two are finding success, there is an opportunity for companies to invest in different workflows beyond their IT and knowledge management systems.
Welcome to Pioneers, the show where we explore the intersection between humanity and AI. I'm your host, Ankur Patel. Over the last 10 years, I've built 3 AI startups, written 2 books about the subject, and I run a weekly AI newsletter. I also regularly teach and speak about the topic at conferences. This technology has grown faster than I think any of us could have imagined, and it's making us ask really important questions, such as how ethical is AI? What will this technology look like in a few years, let alone a few months? And most importantly, does it have the power to truly change the world? And what does it mean for you? On this show, I'll be interviewing the founders, operators, and pioneers that are introducing AI into their companies and industries. We'll be asking them the really heavy-hitting questions that make them dig deep into the core of what we do. And without further ado, let's dive into today's episode. AI is changing how enterprises scale, but not every enterprise is ready to scale with AI. From compliance and risk to GTM execution and investor alignment, the challenge isn't just building technology, it's building systems that can adopt it responsibly. Today's guest, Aman, is the Chief Strategy Officer at Tribeca Softech, a venture accelerator helping high-growth companies in financial services, tech, and healthcare scale through AI and automation. He's led a $30 million Gen AI and cyber risk vertical at BFSI, worked across digital transformation, venture, and M&A, and helped scale Tribeca from 0 to 7 million ARR in 9 months. Aman, welcome to Pioneers.
Thanks, Ankur. I've been actually looking forward to this. We have had great conversations with Tim and the whole Tribeca team, and we have had interactions outside of this discussion, but glad to make it official and to talk about how AI is reshaping compliance, business growth, and overall like growth models. So this is a perfect forum to go deeper and talk about like what's been happening in the market.
You've had a really interesting career doing things like consulting, product leadership, venture partnership work, and now the chief strategy officer with Tribeca. How did those experiences shape your view on how companies scale AI effectively?
I learned that like AI isn't a tech problem, it's a business transformation problem. In consulting, you see enterprises struggle not because they lack like AI tools or a plan. It's just that sometimes they lack alignment, the strategy, the process, and the ownership. So I focus on building bridges between technology teams and executives. That's how you turn AI from a buzzword to into a growth engine.
I think that's a very common theme we hear a lot in financial services and regulated spaces, which is AI has to fit the business model, not the other way around. And
Yeah,
commonly what we see is that organizations that are business led when it comes to AI tend to do a better job of adopting AI versus those that view AI as just a technology. So I'm curious what you see there.
exactly. I guess like you can't AIify any broken processes. You have to fix the engine first. Or in other ways, you have to understand like what are the operating frameworks within a banking ecosystem. Oftentimes, we are dealing with like legacy system backlogs, and then there is no like, clear structure on how it's going to be implemented or integrated within the overall distribution flow. So it becomes like pilot nightmare for a lot of executives, where you're gonna test out a lot of different things, but then there's no clear indication of how it's gonna be implemented and rolled out. So
Maybe let's dive a bit deeper into that. I mean, I think the common struggle, and you still see it, is with financial institutions. They're trying to figure out how to do AI well, right? Like, where do they start? Do they give more dev tooling and frameworks to the IT and engineering team to go and build out AI for the organization? Or do they go to the other side, which is getting the business leaders to shape the strategy, maybe make it a board level conversation, and then bring IT and engineering in, of course, as part of that when it comes to execution and such. I'm just curious, like, given your vantage point at Tribeca, being like in the front row seat, shaping a lot of the strategy, what is your common recommendation of where financial institutions to start, where they should start their process?
that's an interesting question, because the way I think we should imagine this is to figure out what the current state of environment is. We often get a top down narrative of board decisions across, like, hey, adopt AI to boost our revenues by X percentage by X quarter. So that's just like a top down like guidance, without thinking where the real world challenges within the bank are hitting right now. So I think I can break it down into a couple of things. So for example, first could be like legacy, core, and vendor sprawl. So banks don't have a system; they have a museum of systems for core services, loan origination, servicing, payments, fraud, CRM systems, data warehouses, document systems. So I can go on. It's just identity tools. So these are all stitched over each other over the last, like, years that they have implemented. And as technology became more mainstream, more stable, some of these parts have been integrated with, like, modern AI stack or a cloud stack. But modernization isn't just like migrating infrastructure, it is entangling workflows. So that's like one piece of it. Second piece, I think, is culture and incentives. So I think AI reveals like a lot of cultural problems instantly, like shadow AI, because teams can't get approved tools fast enough. Leaders are pushing for innovation but punishing risk taking, and operations teams afraid automation means like sort of a job loss. So these are unfortunately real fears in some of the institutions. And the fix can't be slogans. It cannot be. It's an incentive and a redesign, where you have to focus on upskilling, building credibility, trust, and redeploying to exception handling and customer value, making AI part of like how work gets done. So if there is a strong narrative about like people and the processes and how they're interacting in this change and how things are changing, that makes it very credible. The final piece are, I think, of the challenges, fraud and deepfakes and like different things that are on the rise. And so it's just security isn't a department; it's a product feature now. So having governance, compliance, risk as the guardrails of like deployment. So these are some of the common things which I think are out there, and some of the things which we have seen from multimodal has been at the frontier, or like on the front rows of these, like, it has been with a very credible guardrail infrastructure, very white glove experience on how we transform these journey. And so I think from my experience, like, it's been a great journey for multimodal on this narrative so far.
And you've also helped Tribeca scale a Gen AI and cyber risk vertical for BFSI from zero to tens of millions. I'm curious what the playbook has been for that sort of acceleration.
Yeah, there are multiple use cases that I would love to get into, because I think we should touch upon like how things are changing between different markets. But I just want to start with like the commonality of like unique needs and different constraints. And I wanted to touch upon like the most promising market segment of it all, which I believe is where the trend is gonna make most of its impact. That's the mid-market segment. So regional, super regional, community banks and credit unions. And that's been a focus, I think, for both are companies collectively. So mid-market banks typically face a different reality. They have like less budgets, fewer specialized teams across model risk, data engineering, cloud security. They have heavier dependence on vendors for core and channels. They have higher sensitivity to operational disruption, and deposits and like relationship banking is as the differentiator as they fight with the bigger names. So mid-market bank just don't lose customers to better products, they lose customers to better experience. And what we have been able to, the playbook we're referencing here is to like help them work out or help them through their core constraints, modernize the risk across customer experiences or those workflows, build a trust, credibility, integrity, and sort of across like different functions, and provide a great relationship with data. So fragmentation goes away and integration is integral. The third aspect is people. We have to repurpose them at the cusp of becoming the specialist who maintain the guardrails and become the human in the loop to for inclusion and for overall championship of the modernization of the transformation to go through. And I guess overall it just becomes that as AI is rapidly changing from its inception of like a RAG-based model in 2023 of OpenAI to like then agents and now multi-agents. We have to do a stronger vendor lock in understanding who our trusted partners are and who can deliver the future of AI as well. So having a broad scope of like where we are, what are the processes, frameworks, and how do we bring it together with a reliable vendor, with a reliable partner, create that trust and uplift like the whole ecosystem across like this particular segment is the playbook for the future.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's very like it's very similar to our experience. I think the larger enterprise FIs, they have very large and IT and engineering teams, and in some ways, like they have more at stake. They're larger operations. There's more reputation risk. There is, a lot of people that are working on AI initiatives, and it feels like there's a lot of legacy systems, like a magnitude larger in some ways than some of the mid market players. And with that complexity, it's just very hard to kind of go through the cycles of figuring out what to do in house versus where to find the right partners. And you're being sold to by everybody from the foundation model labs, hyperscalers, to your incumbent vendors. And so it's a very slow, kind of methodical, very deliberate process where I think a lot of things happen in proof of concepts, but then it takes a while to kind of go through the hoops to get into pilots and production. So the adoption cycle tends to be slower. Whereas I think the mid-market players, they also have a lot at stake, of course, but they don't have internal IT and engineering teams generally, not full-blown ones. And so their choice set is a little bit more limited, but that actually makes it easier for them to move more quickly because they don't have to choose to like figure out which foundation models to partner with or hyperscalers to partner with. They know that they need to find, in some cases, startups that are coming down the pipe that could go and help them get to the AI version of their business more quickly. And they're bringing with them a lot of expertise around how to work with different hyperscalers and foundation model providers and different AI frameworks and dev tools. So they're kind of bringing all that expertise and partnering deeply. Then the challenge ends up being which partner do you move forward with? And then which use cases do you go and pick and choose from to get to value more quickly? But that leads me to my second point, of which I'm curious to get your take on, is that what we're seeing is that the companies that find gains from AI end up then compounding those gains because those first wins gives them more confidence to go and make further investments. They're kind of investing the gains they get from AI back into more AI initiatives. So they're accelerating their pace of progress when it comes to AI. And the ones that are a little bit more tepid in terms of how they kind of go and move and make in AI investments, they're kind of being left behind. But that gap is not a stable gap. That gap is getting larger because the ones that are compounding those gains are kind of running away with the gains because they're building more AI into the rest of their businesses. Whereas the ones that are moving a little bit too slowly kind of get stuck. And then the question is, how do you kind of get unstuck fast enough for you to also start seeing compounding gains from AI investments? So I'm curious, like what your playbook or recipe is, or advice is even for companies that are, maybe they haven't quite made enough investments, maybe they haven't seen quite enough impact, but they don't want to be left behind. And now it's 2026, it's 3 years since ChatGPT came online.
Mhm.
How do they catch up quickly so that they're not left behind in the years to come?
Short answer would be partnering with like either us or multimodal. Okay, jokes aside, that's a very interesting question. The way I want to answer this is the majority of the heavy lifting and the legwork has been done. There have been early adopters, there have been experimenters. We all wanted to see what's possible and have the companies who have investments who have made like tons of investments towards advancing different pilots and sandboxes and demos. That itself gives a big, I guess, narrative or playground for earlier the companies who are lagging behind, or the laggards in this case, a strategic advantage to learn from what has been happening in the industry, see what's working, tweak their approach, partner with the companies who have shown incremental momentum and ROI from the investments in the pieces of technology they have invested in. Could be back office, mid office, simple operations like the call center optimization or something like that. The companies who haven't invested in it have this unique opportunity in 2026 to reevaluate their position, see what's been working, and take the best out of industry lessons that has succeeded and double down their
Mhm.
revenue and investments to bridge the gap between where they are and where they want to be. So as a norm, what we are also seeing that the industry is past the experimental theater in some ways. Most executive teams have seen enough pilots, they have seen enough demos. Now boards want outcomes that are in faster cycle times, lower unit costs, better like risk controls, better customer experiences, measurable revenue lift. So in these cases, I think a statement that I would make to all these companies who want to adopt AI or agentic AI or
Mhm.
operationalizing any of those workflows across any of the banking functions is that while these bigger major corporations have invested in a lot of pilots, the pilots does not change a bank. A scaled workflow changes a bank, or how we
Yeah.
think about personalization and outcomes, right?
Yeah, I think the last 3 years have been the era of experiments, like these POCs and pilots and such. And that was for learnings and like to test the technology and whatnot. But as we head into 2026 now, it's very much ROI. Can you get real impact from the AI that's out there? Companies have successfully implemented AI, including agentic AI, and they're getting deep value. And that means if you aren't doing this today, maybe you find yourself behind the curve. It's wake up call to go and move more quickly because the era of experimentation is over, right? And I think that that's going to be a huge story is ROI and impact. And I think all of those things you mentioned earlier around information security and compliance, like the things that get in the way of doing things in a sandboxed environment to do a proof of concept, but then don't work and don't scale well in a production setting, become paramount, right? And so it's figuring out how do you get up to speed on the different compliance and information security aspects that really matter. And so my question to you is, I think a lot of times people view compliance, information security as cost centers, as kind of the tax of doing business. But I think you've argued that they actually can be differentiators and growth drivers. I'm curious if you could speak a little bit more about why that is.
I think see the banks have been running in silos of like we want to run the bank, we want to change the bank, we want to grow the bank, right? Like in each of these scenarios, like running the bank is like stability controls, regulatory commitments, which is gonna perform like how it's been going. Changing the bank would encompass like modernization, cloud migration, AI migration, like core refactoring, and how do we grow these into like new products, experiences, personalization, distribution. So the thing is like when everything becomes a priority, your transformation takes a back seat and it's like behind schedule already before you have started. So having a clear structure of like maturity, governance, compliance, and we are specifically talking about modernization and transformation across like major legacy systems, more or less. So it all comes down to having core functionalities in check, more or less. Like AI maturity follows like data maturity, so having like common data grounds, common data models, right, which are governed, data lineage, domain ownership, like all of those things, right? So the governance part it is not something that can be in a PDF anymore. It has to be part of the conversation from day one. Like, how do you do model risk management? How do you do third party risk management? What are the permissioning? What are the access levels? What it can change? What are the guardrails? Who's monitoring it, right? So there's going to be a lot of like uplift around like effectively deploying AI, where we can realistically imagine the ROI, but what is now believed to be a cost center needs to be reimagined as the security, governance, and compliance regime of the new era. This is what it takes to build a effectively scalable solution across different like platforms or processes, where you can have a measurable ROI and not just like a pilot waiting for execution thing. So every single piece of governance is not, it can't be imagined as friction. It is what turns AI from demo to defensible capacity, like its capability, sorry. So it can just be reimagined as the new guardrail layer, or the like a judge layer to your overall capabilities. So you need a judge in place, you need a systems check, or a context engineering, or like we can name it different ways for different use cases, but we need a checks and balances in place to measurably realize the benefits of changing AI solutions.
Yeah, I think these items that were viewed as maybe kind of checking off the checklist items like auditability, do you have explainable AI, do you have good governance for the AI models you use, can you address AI bias, can you understand and then tamper down hallucinations from AI. These things, if you don't address them as core kind of product features that you need to have, you can't adopt AI well in a production setting. And so they kind of get in the way of something that is really important, which is AI in production delivering real value. And so I think companies that view these as like core product features end up then having much better solutions for things like observability and explainability and AI governance and such, allows them to then move more quickly and then compound those AI gains that we were speaking of earlier. So I do think that's kind of reframing these things as not like checking off the checklist and like and then marking them as done, kind of as a kind of a just an errand or a chore, but viewing them as like first class product features that have to be built well in order for companies to realize that AI vision. So, and I think we've spoken a little bit about mid market versus enterprise financial institutions, but let's talk about some alternative markets like private equity, which I think has been a big adopter of AI. I'm curious what is driving that shift. Why is private equity so keen on adopting AI in the ways that we've seen over the past year?
The reason I would say is the friction. It comes down to like how traditional a bank is, or like depending on which sector or industry you're looking at. Private equity mimics a lot of like banking workflows. They have the relevant set of data, they have similar outcomes, they have financial statements, they operate in the same regime without the burden of regulated like let's say confidential data, regulated environment, constant audit trails, like being compliant with the SEC or the governing bodies, IRS, like all the above, right? So it then it becomes like a playground for new innovation to find a relevant use case and make a difference and position itself as a success story that it works within the same regime. So I think that's why private equity is picking up. We have use cases like we have the due diligence section where you can do enhanced due diligence. We have companies who are spinning off, which are looking to replace analysts to do deep market research, come up with like loopholes in the proposed deal flows, like something like that. So you have like an AI assisted capability to achieve that. Then you have like reading of financial statements, operational playbooks, how a company has been performing. So you look at like all those different parameters. It reflects a banking environment very closely, and some of the implementation mimics what we can do with let's say an example is a underwriting workflow or something like that in a major bank. And this has been a way of proving that, hey, this is not just a thing for demo. We can actually make a difference. We can actually make an impact. And since these private equity markets or hedge funds or like a venture capital space, they are not burdened by a very big or old legacy infrastructure, they're oftentimes keen to experiment with something which will reduce their FTE workload, or they can
Yeah.
gain more productivity points, can either save more or generate more, one of the two buckets, right? Cost or revenue. So that would be my understanding.
Yeah, I mean, I think they're very incentivized to adopt newer technology to make their businesses more competitive, right? There's perfect alignment. If you adopt it, you could outcompete your peers and win. And I think that incentive to win is so high that it kind of prompts them to adopt. I think we've seen this among financial institutions where a little bit of alpha, a little bit of edge in terms of doing deeper, better due diligence, as an example, or sourcing more opportunities ends up making the difference in terms of outcompeting your peers and eking out returns and things like that. So I think the windfall of adopting AI well and allowing you to compete better versus your peers is so clear to them that they're willing to make the investments and they're seeing dividends from those investments. Not always, but in many cases. And I think that's encouraging private equity and hedge funds to lean into this arena quite a bit. So pretty excited to see. So I want to talk a little bit about the MIT study that came out this summer, where 95% of POCs and other experiments don't scale, don't make it to production. I'm curious what the temperature in the room is now in 2026, in light of like the McKinsey study that we spoke about earlier. What are you seeing based on that McKinsey study that should inform the 2026 playbook for financial institutions?
So, great point there. I think the market was kind of skeptical, or they were very excited about what they can achieve with AI when the MIT study came out, and then to all our surprises, it turned out to be not the way we were imagining it to deliver. But since then, few months have passed, and McKinsey just rolled out their State of AI report, which kind of like confirmed that the widespread of AI adoption is there. 88% of the companies are using it in some capacity, but there's a big gap between pilot and scaled impact, which we are talking about since the start of this conversation, right? So with most companies still experimenting through AI agents, they're gaining traction, especially with their ID and knowledge graph, knowledge basis work. That's where they have been focusing, and high performance sort of have driven growth in workflow redesign with the right set of leadership, while many have struggled with accuracy, risk, achieving basically the ROI or EBITDA gains, or in the things that they have invested. So the study, I think, touches broadly upon a couple of things. So that it's an indicator of the adoption is on the rise and people are still investing, and we see a uneven scaling. So nearly 90% of the companies use AI, but two-thirds are still stuck in the pilot experimentation phase, and only 5 to 6% of the companies are true high performance, achieving enterprise wide scale and value. So what we need to take a learning from is to have a closer look at what's been happening. Is it the right level of leadership? Is did they follow a playbook which is very different from the companies or the people that are not achieving similar results? So that could be a big indicator of what's in for 2026. Rise of AI agent is on the rise. It's super hot with 62% of the companies experimenting with it, particularly IT and knowledge management is seems to be the major case, and I guess nearly and every other case is sort of like under 10% utilization. So while these two are finding success, there is an opportunity for companies to invest in different workflows beyond their IT and knowledge management systems. You can look at like risk, you can look at fraud, you can look at governance, you can look at any of those things and find impact. So and yeah, like governance and risk seems to be the underlying accuracy, cybersecurity, explainability, as we discussed, are major concern. And with right risk mitigation, it can be overcome. But for now, it's been lagging behind. That seems to be the case in the research, and emphasizing towards a stronger need for governance. So things which we can like adopt as we advise our customers or clients getting into 2026 is these are the core things that we all should be focusing on. So
It is pretty interesting that knowledge management, right, has been such a big use case over the last 3 years. And in many ways, it's because ChatGPT was so successful. It's like take all of the data you have internally in your
yeah.
organization, query against it. And so it's like a chatbot, very much an assistive experience. And I think we've seen some good implementations of that over the years, like with customers that have done that. We've also seen some customers not do that well and make mistakes along the way. But
Hmm.
I do think that is helpful, but is only marginally able to add value. I think where the real value is are with these agents, right? As you spoke about. So how do we
Yeah.
move from just not just assistive experiences with a knowledge management kind of use case, but truly offload meaningful work in the form of workflows that compromise more complex processes in financial services and offload them to background agents, because that dramatically changes the way that the business operates. And it could be for operational efficiency, so like a cost reduction play and such, but it could also be for a competitive advantage when it comes to new product features or customer experiences. On that trade-off, right, in terms of measuring impact, are
Hmm.
you seeing among your financial institutions that you work with, is it more of an efficiency play in the sense of let's cut costs, maybe let's reduce or cap headcount growth, or is it more let's go and develop better product and service experiences to drive more top line revenue, or is it a combination of the two?
I would say it would come down to what type of customers we're talking to, and every customer either falls on one of the two buckets or maybe both. So it is like basically where you stand and what your goals are. So for a smaller company or mid market institution, the focus is on like being the differentiator in customer experiences and personalization as a way to make a impact or leave a impact in their end customers goal. They want to differentiate themselves with the likes of Bank of America, like Citi, JP Morgan, like these banks. They want to stand out, and they want to stand out in the way they provide exceptionally different or distinguished like experience to their customers. So it's more on like personalization, more on okay, how do we empower our relationship managers to be more sound when providing advice? How do we keep track of changing events that for a client, and how we can provide them the best financial advice across different touch points in the journey. So that could be one example. On the other hand, like we have major institutions who are investing millions of dollars in like sort of reducing or bringing their different ecosystems together, while like one part of the, let's say, a credit card data ecosystem talks to the fraud ecosystem, which also talks to the governance ecosystem. So they're all like blending together to find better experiences or efficient plays, both in backend and in operational efficiency, as well as the personalization that comes out of it, or the shared learning that comes out of it. So if there is a thread of like some kind which introduces risk in one part of, let's say, an application to consumer bank or something, can also be tied to some other type of like lending decision, or like or like a credit card decision or something like that. So how do you not see it as a siloed operation, bring those efficiency metrics together. So it really depends on what type of customers we are talking about, but it's been a mix of everything. And I guess like wherever these companies may start, the goal would be to operationally enhance everything, cut down the bottom line, save cost, save tremendous amount of human work, which is redundant and repeatable and can be optimized and automated. And on the top line, will be able to generate more revenue in terms of, let's say, more lending capacity, more capital deployment, better customer experience across like different divisions. So no matter where they start, it's gonna like in next 5 years, it's gonna end up being like everything for everyone. So they just want to prioritize something and then deliver on it to 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 basically realize their ROI.
Well, man, this has been a masterclass in AI strategy from compliance to growth and governance. I think it's been very valuable to our audience. Where can listeners connect with you or learn about more of your work at Tribeca?
Yeah, so feel free to check us out in on our website. The work we're doing will be, we're thinking of launching our newsletter soon as well. But LinkedIn is the best place to connecting, and I love connecting with operators, founders, investors who are trying to scale responsibly and build the next generation of like AI-driven enterprises. So excited to collaborate, work, explore as this is taking off as a truly differentiating outcomes, not just in within US and the major institutions that we have been speaking about, but overall globally, where it's solving for digital identity, like having a financial like identity with alternate sources of like having data come in, and we want to be the pioneers who enable like some sort of like security across different audiences to make them financially inclusive and provide better customer experiences overall. So glad to be playing a small role in the whole ecosystem of players trying to make an impact.
Perfect, Aman. Well, thanks so much for joining us, and thanks to everyone listening. Don't forget to subscribe to Pioneers for more conversations about how AI is transforming finance, governance, and growth strategy. Thank you, everyone.